There was a guy that had two sons. He was very wealthy. His younger son, when he turned 18, went to his father and said, "Dad, I want you to give me my portion. I want you to give me my inheritance. I don't want to work for you anymore. I want to go out in the world and find my own way." And the father honored his request and gave him the amount, a lot of money. The young man immediately left for a faraway land and started really living up his life, going to the club, VIP, bottle service, spending money, girls, drugs, having a good time, doing all the things that he was constrained from doing when he was with his father. After a while, a famine came on the land and things started to be really hard. All the friends that had gathered around him that he'd had such a good time with quickly abandoned him the moment his money ran out, and he found himself to be in great need. When he went to his friends, they were not to be found. He got so desperate that he had to eventually take a meaningless job, feeding swine, feeding pigs. And he'd fallen so far, coming from a home, a loving home with his mother and his father and plenty to eat, an inheritance, a head start in the world. He'd thrown it all away on riotous living and found himself in the employment of a pig farmer. His job was to go out and to slop these pigs, to feed them with remnants of food and corn husks and rotten things. And so hungry and desperate was he that he would dream of eating the very food that he was supposed to be giving to the pigs. After a while, he got to thinking, good grief, how much better is the position of my father's manservants. He's got all sorts of guys working for him. They've got a nice place to live. He provides them with clothing, water, good food, and pay. What am I doing here slopping these pigs when I could at least be doing that? You see, he realized what he had done, and he knew that he had went too far and his father would never be able to accept him back. Pride kept him from returning home. But his situation became so desperate, he didn't see that he had another choice. So he started the journey. It was a rough journey, on foot, many, many days. And on his way, he had a lot of time to rehearse what he was going to say to his father. He thought, if I could just get out the words quick enough before my father completely loses it, maybe he'll give me a job. I have no expectations of being reinstated as heir or son. I've lost that privilege. So day by day, he rehearsed what he would say. And when the old homestead came into view, his father saw him a long ways off. You see, his father had been looking for him every day, morning, noon, and night. He would travel out to the edge and look at the direction his son had left, hoping and praying that by chance someday he would return. And by chance, that one day, he saw him. Well, when he was a great way off, the father called to his servants, "Come, my son, I believe that's my son, let's go." He met him. He rushed out and ran to him. Didn't wait for his son to come up, wasn't standing there with a stern look, wasn't there waiting to give him a rebuke, a good talking to, a lecture for his improprieties and the shame that he'd brought on his God, the shame he'd brought on the father and his family. He didn't do any of that. He ran out to his son and fell upon him. They fell upon one another. They fell upon their necks. They embraced in a hug. A lot of crying and weeping. The moment the son could compose himself, he started to speak the speech that he'd rehearsed so many times. "Father, I've sinned against you and against God. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But before he could get out his rehearsed speech, his father said, No, I don't want to hear any of that. Snapped his fingers to a manservant. Quickly, put a signet ring on his hand. Take the finest clothing that we have and cover him with this. And send another man back home and prepare a feast. Kill the fatted calf. My son, which was dead, is alive again. He was lost and has been found. That story I've shared many times because it's my favorite story, because it's the story of the prodigal son. Why I like that is because that is such a wonderful allegory of I think, of you and of me, of the times of where we were not able to take the lessons and the guidance from God that would have saved us so many aggravations, so many troubles. We had to go out into the world and get mauled by it and find out ourselves. You know, sometimes you find yourself in that situation when you're in the gutter, when you're feeding the pigs, where everything is falling apart, and you cry out to God and you ask him, why? Why have you done this? Why have you forsaken me? Why have you let things get so bad? And you think back to the very beginning when he approached his son, the son approached the father for the first time. If the father would not have let him go, would not have given him his inheritance, do you think the son would have been able to live peacefully and would have been able to become a productive son and a productive member of the homestead and to learn the lessons that his father wanted to teach him, to prevent him from falling into the pitfalls of life and making all these mistakes that destroy our lives? Sometimes there are people that can do that. And sometimes there are people like you and like me that need to go out into the world and find out for yourself. The saddest part, though, is many of us, because of pride, are unwilling to go back home and to give or rehearse that speech. Because we don't know our Father. We think that when we get home, we're going to receive a rebuke, an embarrassing lecture, or maybe he won't accept us at all and turn us away, and our trip would have been in vain. But the story tells us that the son didn't know his father very well, because he didn't think that what would happen, that he would be reinstated to his previous position, that his father would forgive him for what he had done and help him to get back on track. That allegory in the New Testament is the relationship between us and God. And the most encouraging thing to me is the fact that the father never stopped looking for his son. 3 times a day, he would go out and look. And the moment he saw him, he didn't wait for him to come to make the long journey up the driveway, but he ran to him. He closed the distance. He met him where he was at. God is looking for you. He's been waiting for you to come back the entire time. What have you got to lose?